So why don't we get started? First and foremost, you changed the banner on your LinkedIn profile.
Yes.
How did it make you feel?
Vulnerable. Really, that's really how it made me feel. And in a in a place of a reactionary place versus a proactive at first. That of course is until start getting boots on the ground and start working towards the goal, and then having friends like you who immediately started saying how I'll reach out my network. If you need anything, let me know. Which is awesome. It really hasn't stopped. We had a party just this weekend. Guys that came over was like, "Hey, how's work going?" And he immediately busts out his phone and starts looking at whom he could refer me to. And he sent me a link too for a position. So applied and done with it. So
Amazing. And it's interesting because you have why don't we kind of walk through the current kind of the career path,
sure.
starting from the early days and how you became a technologist. Because we're going to dive into it, but you do have a passion for this stuff. So
Yeah.
walk me through memory lane in terms of how you started. What was kind of your first couple of gigs, or maybe even beforehand, when you were taking apart some electrical devices when you were.
So my first requirement for having a computer at work was actually the only job I had where I used my anthropology degree, where I was doing online research in the mid 90s, cultural people groups around the world. And it was not nearly as the resources then were a pittance compared to what's available now. It'd be so much easier to do it now. You could probably do it with AI now. Just say, hey, tell me about this people group, how long, what's their current population, where are they currently located. And in the last 25, 30 years, I'm sure that's changed as well, especially with all the upheaval in the Mideast. So to do that, I didn't have a computer at the time. My eldest stepbrother, Mitch Gwynn, he sent me an old 286. I don't even know what the speed. It's probably I don't even know what the speed of the CPU was, but I know there was half a megabyte of graphic memory. And I only know that because in 1999, while at LSU, living outside LSU, I was running up the stairs to go to their library where they had all their internet access, which was, you didn't have to authenticate at the time. And because I wasn't enrolled at the time, just to be clear. And running up the steps, and I threw my back out. And so while recovering at home, I was watching TV and I heard about this free operating system called Linux. So long story short, really it's not even that long, but I went back to LSU, got a copy off the internet, and installed it on that old 286, and even compiled a kernel overnight. First, right out of the box, took me a few hours of getting to that point. And there was an old SUSE, a full copy of SUSE Linux. Well, it's SUSE, but it's SUSE. And probably about version 7 or 9, maybe. And I'm not sure I'd recognize the artwork they had, even if I saw it. But in any case,
Was it a chameleon, something like that? I
that's
think.
the logo. But each
Okay.
piece they had these graphs of computer renditions of, like, 3D renderings of graphs or functions, I should say. But in any case, so I went through that manual and did everything I could to learn. And because of that half meg of, of GPU space, I couldn't run X. I couldn't even run a graphical system. But that was great because I really learned the command line. And over the next 4 years, that was my hobby, was Linux and doing things with Linux. I even did Linux from scratch. Got a new computer. At the time, I was teaching Spanish. Moved from Baton Rouge to Dallas Fort Worth, and thankfully there, by the way, because I was able to get on transition from teaching English to doing web hosting support. There's a small job in between, but it was really that first job at CI Host, which does no longer exist, and won't say anything else about that company. If you're interested, go look it up. Interesting stories there. The mastery of the command line really got me into that job. And the first guy I sat with, I'm still friends with today, a guy named Con Nguyen. And since my wife graduated in music performance, wanted to get her opera career started. By the time she graduated, I was working at Checkpoint doing tax support. And a guy from New York had moved down, and Claudia finally talked me into moving to New York so she could pursue her opera career. And we moved and got on with the bar, company called Cyphertex, which has since been sold to another company. And was there for 4 years. I did a small stint at another reseller. Wasn't a good fit, and it just and if I just paid attention to this one little thing, I would have recognized that it wasn't a good fit. During the interview process, I had hiring manager had come into New York and brought him to this great gastro pub called the Spotted Pig, and we're having these just every time we talk, just continuous conversation, just going and going and going, and it literally just went and just dropped off. I was like, well, that was weird, and we just at that point we just went and sat down and had our meal. But it was odd. There was something weird about it, like something just stopped, like don't go any further, and I didn't catch the clues. It was something ephemeral, not necessarily analytical, and yeah, that didn't work out. But I got this.
Do you think it's something you said or something that,
No,
what do you think was,
we were just talking and talking, and it was just flowing, and the flow just cut off. It was like
but why?
yeah,
Like,
I don't know.
can you,
That's it. It can't be analyzed. It was
oh
like
God, I
supernatural.
was hoping you're going to have some sort of profound,
Oh,
you know,
it's pretty profound.
well, a recommendation in terms of, but there's a saying like how it starts and how it ends.
Mm. Oh,
So I think that, that whatever clues you get, and it's true for relationships, it's true for everything else, not just for looking for jobs. So
mm.
talk to me about the early days. It's really interesting because it was the heydays of technology and, cybersecurity and tech and firewalls, and you were in the midst of it just because you happened to be in VARs is a really good place to be because they're exposed to all these technologies. You get to learn from all these vendors. Talk to me about the early days. What were your kind of the technology you're working on,
So,
and how do you saw the market then?
so it was much more simple time for sure. Um, and it was a lot of what was going on, and particularly smaller organizations, was very much wild, wild west. There's a comedic video that you can find on YouTube called Sales Guide versus Web Dude. And that's pretty good. The access, the unfettered access that the web guy had was very much what it was like. And not necessarily that I had that kind of access, but it was there. It wasn't the fine grain access, the carefulness and whatnot. Now, in some cases, the smaller organization, you're just going to have to need that. But in the video, I don't want to say what he did, but he was able to change something to cover his mistake he made, and it's pretty funny. If you were around in a small organization during that time, you'll find it funny. If you're the victim of what happens in that video, you won't find it funny at all. And but yeah, it was very much the Wild West. So there's a liberty there that you can do this, you don't have to worry about that. You just have to be careful. There's a lot of self responsibility that you got to take care of. And that before getting specifically into cybersecurity, that really built up my sense for security. and where you got to be careful, where you're not, you got to think twice about whatever command you're about to do, and double check. If you're not sure, double check. And if you don't, you're going to end up making a mistake. And or worse, right? It might be production, or just might be a bad route that you inject into a small segment of the network. And both of which I've done.
It's also from the Linux days, right? Because
Yeah, very much
I
so.
remember running Linux, and you run a command,
Hmm.
and then nothing happens. Nothing. There's no prompt,
Feedback.
and then it's like you could have erased your entire hard drive or something,
Yeah.
and it just blip, like you have the command, and then it's like, what just happened? You have no clue.
Well,
There's no
at that
input.
point, if it doesn't return back to you soon enough, that's a clue. You're doing much more than I wanted it to. And so those technologies was, my exposure before getting on a checkpoint was primarily, um, I wasn't touching firewalls. I wasn't touching specifically security products. I was touching, making sure that troubleshooting connectivity, uh, figuring apps on web servers and access, that kind of stuff on that level above layer 4. And backups and all these, basic stuff. Yeah. But, at the same time, making sure that layer 1 was also plugged in, right? That cabling was there, that a device was, if it wasn't reachable, I could go over with a KVM, directly connect to the device itself, depending on the server hardware, and, make sure it's on, make sure it was doing whatever it's supposed to be doing, and go from there. If necessary, physically reboot, right? So sometimes the problem is very low. Sometimes it's a matter of layer 1 or layer 2, and you might spend a whole bunch of time troubleshooting at layer 3 and 4, but sometimes you need to go much lower.
So people and companies care more about the connectivity piece, just to make things work, more so than the underlying security
Yeah.
associated with it. Is that a correct statement?
Okay. So availability is part of security, and it is the most important part of security. When it comes to CIA, I prefer to put the A first. You can put whatever behind it, but if there's no availability, there's not much reason outside of a standing kiosk to have confidentiality, integrity, in what you're doing there. And that's only if it's exposed on a physical layer to what you don't want to expose to, or to untrusted individuals. So if your availability isn't there, and that includes that the data exists or has proper permissions on the system itself, etc., uh, why go any further? There's nothing else to do. So in AR, most people, if they can't do business, and then that was one of the most important things I've realized over the years, is that, okay, so you have this idea of what security is, and then there's probably what real security actually is, whether they overlap or not. And then you have businesses that need to get things done. And business is served by security. The business doesn't serve security, it's the other way around. So they have to get things done, and they assume at a certain point, a certain level of risk for, whatever it is. Some of it can be company destroying or reputationally destroying if they don't take care of it, but they make those decisions. So that's up to them. It's on them. If you're a security practitioner, you have to divorce yourself from that, and you may even have to protect yourself from that, where someone says, hey, I need you to do this, and you go, sure, if you'll just sign off on it. I need in writing that you told me to do this, and I'm not going to do it unless you do that, because I do not recommend this, and I need to be able to defend myself. Now, you don't have to get that confrontational, but you do what you need to do to protect yourself. I've never been in that situation personally, but I know there's situations where there are products that I've sold, like with firewall products. It's like, okay, great, there's a change management process. Someone's going to sign off on this very bad decision, and now this product will keep track of that for you.
So Bill, people have through the years, you were exposed to incidents, things that happen. That if you can share some stories, maybe without divulging information, or maybe there's the pass of you can unveil it. They releasing now the Area 51 files because
Oh
it's
yeah,
been 50 years. Maybe not for us. Maybe like for us, it's like 5 years is enough.
yeah.
Most people don't remember anyway. Any
Well,
stories you can share throughout
yeah.
your career, like things that happened that you were
This
that,
organization is defunct now, and this wasn't. I personally don't think this was necessarily anyone's fault because I didn't. I don't know how serious the notification was that this particular um, host-based firewall, how serious the vulnerability was, and what came after that announcement. Within 36 hours, someone released a worm for this particular firewall, and it's the Black Ice firewall. This was in, I believe, 2003, maybe 2004, and the witty worm is what got it. The witty worm came out within 36 hours of the notification that there was a serious flaw in this Black Ice firewall, and they had a patch for it. So they knew about it internally. They fixed it. They announced it. They had a patch. This was at that web hosting company I worked for, and it took down 100 hosts, Windows-based web servers that had lots and lots of customers on it. Our phones rang for 2 weeks straight. Multiple phones. Everyone had a phone at their desk, and I think there was 10 Linux admins or support and 10 Windows support guys. And those phones rang, and extra phones up at the front, and they rang for 2 weeks straight. People trying to get their web servers back up. And that was, at the time, was the fastest spreading worm on the internet. And there's a couple things I learned from that. Um, Outside of already had bias for Windows, at the time, it was very difficult to get them back up because if you had multiple IP addresses on a Windows server, you had to enter them. You couldn't enter them in a batch way. You had to do it individually, IP address, subnet, all the four spaces, and then apply, wait for it to come back. So it's very difficult. And thank God for orchestration now and being able to do infrastructure as code, because it just would not.
so this is interesting because this is like the panic mode,
Mhm.
like that you are in the midst of something that happened and you're actually experiencing it,
Yeah.
meaning that there's issue with availability, as you mentioned. If shit hits the fan, and now everybody's scrambled to get that fixed. And it doesn't seem like a lot of change has changed. We hear, just replace the name of the firewall or
Yeah.
the app with the name of the worm or the malware or the whatever else, like the ransomware, replace the variables, but it's really the same.
Yeah.
Why are we still, after all those years, all this investment in people and machines and technology, we're still pretty much very similar situation that we were 20 years ago.
Very much so. Part of it is the ever expanding functionality and features that software provides. It's just one more thing to secure, one more vector to consider. There's the human element is always the weakest link. That's why emails are still the most significant threat vector. Um, I would love to hear what CISOs think about limiting individuals in an organization having access to an email account. I know personally, if I worked for an organization and they didn't give me an email account, it would be weird. It would be feel really weird unless I was like,
Hmm.
I don't need that,
Maybe,
you'll do
Bill,
whatever.
maybe they should have, how like when in airplanes, when the airplane is unstable,
Mm-hmm.
They have a system that's called fly-by-wire,
Mm-hmm.
meaning that they don't want the pilot to. So the pilot makes a move, and then the computer or whatever, something else takes control. So what you're describing is like this email is unstable,
Yeah.
meaning that you can't control the security of it. Why don't we create a buffer, like a fly-by-wire email system, where when you're interacting with your email, you don't really interact with email. You interact with a buffer or some sort of system between you and the email
Yeah.
server. And I think that they're already trying to do that. The inbox is like, I don't know, there's so many email security companies out there
Yeah.
and plugins for and warnings,
Yeah.
caution, this email is from external sender, all that stuff. And I don't know if that any of that stuff helps.
Well, I'm pretty sure that if any of my BSD friends are watching this, they'll just saying use a text-based email client. Just do it. Just do it.
Well, how are you going to be able to see all those memes that get
I
sent in your
know, right?
inbox?
What about
That's a problem.
those cat memes, right? That's what that's what the
And
internet.
it's even worse. You're going to send
Yeah.
a link to something else.
Yeah. Well, I was using the last time I used Max email. It does not by default just show you, like, give you some kind of pop up of what the link is. The cursor might change, but it doesn't show you what the link is for. So you're like, what are you doing? Why?
Well, I think AI is going to answer all the emails anyway.
Yeah.
I think that's all these plugins that just tell it, okay, like learn the way I answer it. I create a bot agent, AI agent, and say, hey, listen, just respond on my behalf, and I'll check once a week,
Yeah.
and then only show me. And I think there's already bots out there that basically summarize all the emails that you received
Yeah.
and give
I,
you just the highlights of things you need to worry about.
yeah. There's definitely a place for that. I think today, without any sophistication of and so long as that bot cannot forward, there's a place for that for the info, at whatever organization. Could be very helpful. And whatever is publicly available, hey, maybe you could, essentially end up with a search agent or at least a reference to, hey, go to this interface. Then you start dropping cookies and getting a little bit more information about it.
But nobody responds to email anyway.
Yeah, there's
It's like crickets. It's like a black hole. It's like dev/null.
mhm,
Everything you send out, even internally in the organization, it doesn't seem like, I think people are waiting. And if they don't get the same email 3 times,
yeah,
even internally, like they just don't respond. It seems like by default, it's just not responding. It's something you wonder if there's anybody on the other side.
yeah. Is there anybody out there? One of the most important things in cybersecurity, and one of the most challenging, because at a certain point, if I hold up my Florida driver's license, check out the number, a Florida driver's license, this is a government issue ID. So at some point, you trust that this is real, right? Show you a passport. The government says this is who I, and whatever else, birth certificate, etc. And at a certain point, there is a trust must be given, right? And it's the same thing when someone onboards to a company. Trust has been given. They're onboarded. They get an email address. Now you get an email from someone. Are they who they claim to be? And that's one of the most important things, like internally, where you have uh, the CEOs being impersonated and telling the CFO to transfer money into whatever. And if there's not a proper policy or procedure for doing that, there needs to be a trust but verify in that case, not just, hey, this looks like it's from the CEO. He's wherever, it said this, and, to avoid don't do the blah, 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 whatever. It doesn't matter. You're talking about major funds for the organization that, may be required just to make pay, just to pay, make payroll. So there has to be uh, rigorous policies on a not only on a there could be an abusive relationship between the CEO and the CFO, and if they get this email, the CFO may be hesitant to double check. It's just like, oh my God, I don't want them yelling at me, right? And then he goes ahead and does it. And now the whole organization suffers. So we never know what's going on that level. And so there has to be a impersonal means of confirming who's the sender and in some cases the context, because there could be, there's other reasons for that.
And tell me, you're doing a lot of work with as customer facing, right? The role of a sales engineer is definitely critical to the success of a vendor. Talk to me about that experience and why is that important, and then what is the role of a sales engineer, and what do you think is the attribute that makes one successful?
Well, the first part is to listen. Of course, there's always the technical base. There's the curiosity and the things that get you into technology in the first place, that keep you sustained in technology, that keep you from burning out. That aside, once you start dealing with people, you got to be willing to help them. You got to believe you have a solution. You got to believe that this solution works. Before I actually got a sales job, I pretty much imagined myself only being able to sell things I had absolute confidence in. Whether it's a swing away can opener, which are fantastic, or an iron skillet, right? Just two things I knew enough about that I could go door to door and try to sell them, right? But once you understand the technology and understand what the problem is, you're going to have two cases. You're going to have people that actually have a pain, are going suffering through it, and then you are there to say this is why or how we can solve it and why it's a better fit for you, and et cetera. After you've listened to how they're describing the pain and whether or not they've revealed all the possible pain points that you're aware of, and then you can go forward and properly talk about those things. And if they have a particular feature that you don't have, then you got to find a way to mitigate that. Maybe partner up with another vendor. I remember being at a particular company that the RFE went out from a financial organization, and no single vendor had this solution. And the competition went in individually and tried to fit this, and basically left it up to the client to figure out whether or not this vendor can go together and figure it out. But I don't remember if it was the company I was working for or the other company, but they came together and said, hey, let's do this together. And they, as a team, went in, two different organizations, two different vendors, and they won the deal. And cool. That's you got to think outside the box. You got to think of, all right, here's this thing. Who does it? Maybe we can partner up with them and meet this need. Now, sometimes it's just one little thing and your competition is it. And so you're kind of on the edge there. You got to figure out another way to provide value. And it might have to, kick that to the sales guy to figure out how to mitigate that.
In that process, the sales process also changed.
Yeah.
What you just described, it's slower process in the enterprise. It takes a long time. There's a lot of decision makers. One would argue that a lot of the decisions are made without you guys being there.
Yeah.
Meaning that you go and do your meetings and do the technical, and they go behind closed doors and make decisions. How has that process changed as well? And because a lot of it in the early days, you can only get that information from the people in front of you, most likely. Things have really dramatically changed. You can gather most of it, if not 99% of it, maybe aside from some confidential information, without even the individuals being there, the sales team.
Yeah, it's the customer has the upper hand as far as research, and maybe they're already with another vendor, and they have personal experience. They see the challenges that a particular vendor has in providing value, and maybe it's just a hard thing for anyone to do. But now you're at a vendor and now you're up to bat. Are you making it easier for them? Are you any different? Are you differentiated?
I would say, Bill, people don't buy differentiation. It seems like and even if you have issues, right? You have a current solution and it's not really perfect.
Yeah.
The odds of you may go out there and see what's out there, but the odds of you forklifting or making a change just because you're not overly satisfied,
Mm.
and maybe the salespeople are all over it, but I've seen cases where they just live with it.
Yes, there is a lot of living with it. Um, there's a particular organization that has a, challenging licensing processes and doing clawbacks where they've done audits on, oh, you have this acquisition, and oh, this company that you just acquired, they weren't paying us, properly, and here's the inventory, and now you owe us millions. Thank you very much. And different people respond differently. Some of them are just like, oh, got to take it. Other priorities, we have other fires that we got to deal with, and I can't deal with this right now. We'll deal with it in 3 years, right? So you have their sales cycle stuff. Some people are just so offended that they're willing to rip and replace, and they'll look for differentiation. I have seen where, all right, we need to write up this RFE and describe this so that we can get out of this egregious contract that we entered into to get a particular discount. And because this organization cannot meet this all these requirements, we're going to go with you. And I have seen that, and it's rare though. It's not like you said. Complacency is really once you win a customer, it's usually yours to lose. Outside of another organization coming up with really good marketing, um, I had a discussion with someone about a particular firewall vendor, and I said I had forgotten that he was the SE for this vendor when they first came in to this partner. But all I remember is this sales guy saying this outrageous statement that wasn't true. But I remember it, and they're doing awesome. They're doing fantastic. There's no denying it. And part of it was marketing. Now, I don't think every sales guy did approach it the way he did, but
Isn't it perception is reality? Does that apply over here? Or
yeah,
fake it until you make it? I mean, we can come up with all these,
yeah,
idioms.
and you repeat something often enough, and it there you go. But they did have a new technology. They did have innovation, but they had excellent marketing, and they still have excellent marketing.
And I would say to double click on that, you're 100% correct. And I say why is the marketing works well, and I tell you what, this is my take on it, and we can agree or argue about this. The problem is it's so complicated. It's so complex. The
Oh,
decision makers, they need to justify it to most likely to non-technical people,
yes.
business owners. And
Mm.
so they need something that they can take, repeat that, rehash it. It sounds good, and then they can go out and get some money for it and apply, and then get the pat on the back.
Or to consolidate vendors. You consolidate vendors, maybe you have better negotiating, because you're dealing with more money now. Maybe you can get an extra point on. You have one throat to choke, hopefully one throat to choke when it comes to support. Um, so yeah, there's this particular one I'm thinking of. They were consolidating functionality into this particular product, and it worked. And
So, but the single pane thing, the single pane of glass, like
I didn't say
like
that.
consolidation, one throat to choke. I heard that, and then it went to best of breed,
Yeah, yeah,
and then it goes back to it's all cyclical.
yeah.
It's like a whole industry just goes out
It,
and back
it
and
is.
out and back.
It is tidal. You're absolutely right. There's a new wave of pulling back from the cloud, and there's some really good use cases for that, because you can have a private cloud, and compute is getting cheaper, and the particular example I saw, Dell makes some really great hardware that these guys were going to do this on, and you could even do it in a data in a disaster recovery configuration and still end up cheaper. Now, part of that that impetus for them was, you know, got the exact word, but you need to audit what compute you're using in the cloud to be judicious, to justify whether or not you need to continue in the cloud. And if you're over subscribed or just using things willy-nilly and not being responsible, then you need to, at least do that and then reevaluate your situation and go from there.
But isn't it the management of all of it? I mean, that's the beauty of some of these cloud providers. It's just that they deal with all the plumbing, the nuts and bolts of it, and the power and all that stuff. So you don't have to worry about. Because yeah, you can buy some great Dell service, but then you have to get a room, and you gotta make sure it's compliant and security and the pipes. And I mean, there's just a whole slew of things you have to worry about.
Sure, and there's probably data centers that are empty, but there's data centers still being built today, and they're not necessarily owned by the cloud, by the cloud titans. And it just depends on the organization. The smaller the organization, the smarter it is to go to the cloud. If you, take a gaming company, they go and deploy or release a new game, to be a surge of people, depending on, they expect a surge of people to play that game, particularly if it's online and multiple players, multiplayer, and they need that surge. They need to be able to have a cloud provider that can handle that surge and then collapse it after that initial interest. And once they see what it's going to be, continue from there. So that's brilliant. That's absolutely wonderful for them to be able to have that kind of service. It depends on the organization. That particular example I was thinking of, they already had data centers, so they were hybrid, and they're already paying for space and whatever, and they just literally, the compute had shrunk, and they were able to stick it in and provide what they needed. Now, how it's worked for them since, I couldn't possibly tell you, but that was, my experience is every network has its own fingerprint, and the higher you go up the OSI stack, the more complicated it gets. And so you not only have fingerprints, but you have a whole genome expressed out in routing and permissions and applications and how those applications are implemented. That was one of the neat things about NDR, which is what I got to do in my last position, was that because of how programs are implemented, against which libraries they're implemented, when they go to create a TLS encrypted session, they present these ciphers in such a way that it becomes a fingerprint because of who programmed it against which libraries. And there you go. You can end up with this identity for these things, whether it's PowerShell, whether it's Google, which Google's now starting to jumble that up to try to, for whatever reason, they have cookies, so they don't, whatever security that Google's doing, they just look at the cookies, right? And maybe they have something else that is indicative for them that they're not telling anyone about, but I doubt it. That's one of the cool things about NDR is you have these protocols, and if those protocols aren't followed, then you don't have communication. And if you can parse those protocols, you can get a lot of information about what's going on in the network. And of course, you always have the source and destination is going to be there. And so it's
so if we come back, Bill, to like all these mishmash of these acronyms, NDR, XDR, SOAR, orchestration. I mean, there's so many. Do you need all of them? Do you need the entire stack? Do you need, if you have network detection and response, do you need like an endpoint? Do you need, I mean, it seems like an ever-ending stack of security controls.
Yeah.
And what's more effective than others? And are they all like, do they all work together? Do they like play well together? Like, how do you consolidate? And then where do you take all these alerts? And who does what with it? I mean, it's just, or is it automatic? I mean, there's just so many things that are, involved in protecting the organization.
Yeah, you got to have a clear focus on what you need to conduct your business, right? And if that's not clear, then everything else is going to be muddled.
So define clear focus, and that's a really good point. Meaning, know what your critical business process is.
Yeah, so if email is your bread and butter as far as communication with your clients, you're gonna
Is this the same email you mentioned that you don't want people accessing?
yeah. But if for some reason that is your bread and butter, Mailchimp, that's about all I know about Mailchimp. But anyway, then you're going to be focused completely around that. You're going to make sure that you're not getting put on spam, and you're going to make sure you have double opt-in, stay off those spam lists. You're still going to end up there, but you want your double opt-in and et cetera. And you're probably going to be pushing for as much new features as possible. But getting off the email, so if you don't need, here's an interesting thing. So Neil Yu, I think I said his name correctly, came up a few years ago at RSA, 2020 RSA. He did a talk talking about the concept of DE or DIE, distributed, immutable, and ephemeral. And he did this analogy between pets and cattle. And you name pets and you don't name cattle. And they're kind of a commodity, and some farmers might challenge that, but the point is that you have resources that have specific host names that need to remain with those specific host names, like your email servers, like your DNS, maybe some web servers, definitely your authentication, your servers responsible for authentication, etc. Those get protected by CIA. Confidentiality, integrity, and availability. You always want those to get the extra attention that they need. Now, if you have an immutable website, you're not taking input from clients, and it's just informational. That's an immutable part of your of the web facing information. So you can distribute that easily, distributed, and it's ephemeral. Maybe you change it down the road, and what you do is you tear it all down and build it back up. Perfect for Terraform, etc. Whatever orchestration you have, just you can treat it as code where you have versioning and everything. Say you had to have 1,000 servers with this immutable content, even if it's just part of your normal website, and some of it is taking in information. You still need to be able to know this works at this version, and if there's a flaw in it or something doesn't work, we can easily tear it down, fix it, test it, tear it down, and deploy the new one at a new version so there's no confusion. And if for something still goes wrong, you roll back to the previous version and you know exactly what to expect. To DI get compromised, and you can't fix whatever the vulnerability is, and it takes an attacker X amount of time to execute that attack. Tear it down, redeploy it, let them waste their time. They're not getting anything that's not already publicly available. And outside of, and particularly in the cloud, right? If this was internal, it's a little bit different because they may be able to pivot off of a host. If it's in the cloud, just tear it down, redeploy it. Don't even, particularly if it's something you can't fix or don't plan on fixing. We just need to get to the end of the month with this, right? And then we're done with that campaign or whatever it is they're doing with that. And the attackers can deface it, and we'll just put it right back up, if they get better. Because attackers, they don't age like spoiled milk in the sun, right? They age like fine wine. Security products tend to age like milk in the sun, and perhaps camembert, right? Just yuck.
How many times did you walk in to do a four-legged sales meeting where it's you and the salesperson, and then you had the salesperson say outrageous stuff, meaning that they overpromise things that you were supposedly have to deliver afterwards? How
Uh,
did you handle that?
so I don't think I've had an overpromise um,
Or
situation.
just massaging of the truth,
Well,
or
I
on the,
got a story. It was a rough one, and I don't want to give away too much
this
information.
is a rough podcast.
Yeah.
We can bleep any.
So we visited a an investor, and they had dropped significant money into this vendor, and the CEO of the organization that I was with um, was there, and so was the head of sales, and then the local rep. And process revamping the roadmap, and so things were in flux, and it wasn't clear what was currently available or what was going to be available or possible. And the CEO does a presentation, and it has wrong information on it. And one of the investors,
When you say wrong, wrong how?
well, it was basically saying we could ingest information from a major product, so we could.
It was technically wrong.
Correct, technically.
Okay.
And so the that piqued the interest of one of the engineers present, and so I'm trying to cover for the
On
CEO.
the other side,
Yeah,
the evaluators, the
now the
people
deal
that are.
was that the deal was already done and the investment was already made, and nothing was on the line in this case. But they wanted to be able to see how they could leverage this product themselves, and so this guy's just keeps pressing, and I'm trying to hem and haw, trying to cover. It's like, what in the world's going on? And I didn't want the CEO to look bad in front of this major investor, and it made me look bad, frankly. So I basically fell on the sword, and in retrospect,
But hold on, don't go there yet. When you say you can't say fell on your sword and just not say exactly what happened. I'm sorry, like
well,
you
no,
gotta.
we just end up being argumentative, because I'm trying, and I don't remember exactly the way it came about or it proceeded, because
Well, obviously you remember how it made you feel.
oh yeah, it made me feel like very uncomfortable. The CEO is not saying anything. The head of sales is there, and I got bold enough to say, "Hey, so and so, how'd you think I did?" He put me down. And I was like, "Oh, all right. Well, I appreciate the feedback." And then I even had a conversation with him later, and it's like, "Look, this was the situation," and they ended up leaving the organization.
So
I stayed.
covered for them,
The salesperson,
basically.
uh, you know, it was like, you came across as the smartest person in the room. It's like, fuck, I was just trying to cover for the CEO. And,
But in this particular case, there was not a whole lot at stake. I mean, the deal was closed.
well,
There's some safe face.
I didn't know the deal was closed at the time.
Oh, I see. I gotcha.
Yeah. And, I wanted this guy, even if I knew the deal was closed, I didn't want him looking bad, because he was the head of the organization. As far as I was concerned, he was the face of the
But you didn't get any credit for it afterwards,
no.
or did you?
And maybe I did with the CEO. Maybe he recognized it was his slide, and
Do you think if you called him today and say, "Hey, listen, you remember me? I took one for the team back then." Do you think that they remember the same as you, or is it something
that's a
that
good question.
completely passed her?
That would be an interesting. Maybe we can maybe get you to be a fly on the wall and make that call.
But what's interesting about what you just described is you can take that example and apply that everywhere. I'm sure that happens more than you think, because just due to the fact that first, the whole product development is a moving target. It's
Yeah,
always in the next release.
yeah.
A lot of times
Well,
these,
so looking back on it, that is not how that product worked at all. It didn't make sense. Looking back
so
on,
it wasn't even a next release. There was no release whatsoever. It wasn't even close to.
no, what it was inverted. because it was presented as we take in from here, but really it was we go out to there. It was
Well,
it was just a it was
just
just
slight detail. Devil's in the details, I guess, like in and out. It's
mm,
just gonna flip. But coming back to the product roadmap, it's always subject to change.
yeah,
You're getting push and pull from customers, from your resources in terms of what you need to do to develop, and then you have these promises to your customers. It's quite complex, the whole process of going to market, and it's never standalone. Meaning that it's not like you develop a product and it's now ready, and it's also like your features and benefits might be winning at this moment in time, and then your competitors will catch up, and then you catch up, and so the whole process is quite complex. And then you, as a sales engineer, and the team has to you almost like have to dance between among the raindrops to not get wet while this whole process is happening.
yeah, yeah. You have to um, if product management or someone on your team is not regularly communicating to you what product management is doing and what the roadmap is, you need to be asking for it as a sales engineer. Um, because someone on your team may be getting briefed, and if they're not briefing you as well, then that's a problem because that you need to know where the company's going. Not only for your customer's sake, but for your own sake. You may see something that you think is a really bad idea for whatever reason, and that may affect your decision to continue with the organization or to go somewhere else. So keep yourself informed in that manner, and look at how other organizations are approaching the features that your product provides. And I say that because we have an interesting solution where a not firewall was used to do internal segmentation for firewalls. And it's like instead of firewalls, rather. Now, firewalls for internal segmentation that can get really pricey just because of how many you need and the throughput and et cetera. It depends on what throughput you're dealing with. But the larger the organization, of course, the more that scales out. So, but I've seen other products be used. So that aside, um, whatever features your product does that your company's selling or that you're focused on, look at the other vendors. Like there's one that I've seen before, and I saw one organization did marketing better, another organization did integrations better, and that's where I was coming with this is if you do have a product, you need to be ready to be able to integrate with other products, and you have to support SIM. You cannot avoid that. You probably want to integrate with EDR. And if there's something that, EDR, SIM, EDR, and NDR are seen as the SOC triad, right? And NDR is usually the last piece that gets put into place there for good reason. And it's usually money. And then also, the capabilities of your team to be able to effectively use an NDR solution for threat hunting. We're pretty much going to start in SIM, and I know where that we could go with that, and we should someday, and I can't wait to see where that goes. But so interoperability, being able to take your findings and make them available to others is huge because you never know what capabilities an organization has. Like there are large financial organizations that do a lot of homegrown stuff, and they're good at it, and they don't need your product, or some of them at least. And uh, so that's interesting. And you have a lot of clever programmers out there and people that can parse information and integrate it into making good decisions about their network and the security thereof. Whether it be we need to remediate this or we can mitigate it with this control. Yeah, they can do it. And but if your product doesn't play nice with others, It's
Right.
really the Unix. It's really that Unix foundational principle of being able to take things in, be able to put things out, and you'll be really much happier that way.
And coming back to the kind of the sales process, one would argue that it's really the sales engineer that wins the deal, meaning that they can make the product look good, but also create the relationship with the technical team, make them feel confident. And a lot of times they interface much more with the customer in the initial sales process than the salesperson. Salesperson sets up a meeting, you're off to the races, but then there's technical calls, and maybe sometimes it's on site, but you're constantly interfacing with the tech team, depending on the solution, of course.
Yeah.
In that process, is create some sort of uh, camaraderie, I guess, between you and the
Yeah.
technical
Common
team, and
stuff.
that's wins. Yeah.
So if you're relieving their suffering, if you're addressing that pain point, the product does that, then that's where your win's going to come in. It really comes in when the boots are
So
on
you
the.
really are a product therapist.
Yeah. Yeah, and some products though, you have to convince them that they have pain that they're not feeling yet, but it's going to come, and if they will, just listen to you, then you can address it. But that's a
A
latent.
pain that you're not feeling yet.
Yeah, latent pain is what I think of the way I heard it put.
Is it phantom pains?
Yeah. Oh, those are the best, right? No. They no, latent pain is where, like, say you can make something more efficient for an organization. It's more of a business process thing at that point. From a security perspective, latent pain could be a signal to, like in the NDR space, it would be signal to noise ratio. You have this, your SOC analysts are burning out because you have high signal to noise ratio. And if you can get that lower, or do the low level stuff that makes the SOC level 2 or 3 analyst confident that what's being fed to them doesn't have to be rechecked, or maybe something's not right, or they quickly check it, confirm that the level analysts provided good information, then that's latent pain. And that's where you know the that's where you got to break through that complacency that we were talking about earlier, where they're willing to deal with that pain because they have other priorities. And
And how do you know, Bill, that you're doing the right thing through that process? Is that, do you develop like a gut feel that you're gonna win the deal, or like, and do you recognize there's? I think there's always a turning point. Like it's
yeah,
almost like you're like climbing this hill of trust and on the technical level, and all of a sudden you manage to do something, and you're like, okay, so you're over that hump, and now we win the deal.
so from a demo perspective, it's usually the questions are indicative of that we're heading that way, or we've reached that point, even before the POC or the POV begins. If they're asking the questions that are that show that they understand what the solution does, or are common questions about that field or whatever it is, that's encouraging. And at that point, the energy's going. You know that they're interested. They get it. They're interested, and now let's go forward. And it continues into after the POV as well. My favorite was um, when I did this one. Let me see if I can. I don't want to reveal anything, but in this particular network, they had some intermittent availability, and the solution that we were selling went through the network and took in all the layer 3 configs, looked at their interfaces, and looked at all their access, analyzed all the access in the network, and then took in their vulnerabilities and showed, vulnerability prioritization. But to get there, you have all the inventory of all the IPs in the network if you get all the devices. It had a way of crawling through the network to find other devices. So say it saw a route in a route table to a hop that wasn't in the network, it would try to authenticate to it, unless you told it not to. Of course, you might be a partner or something, et cetera. And you could do compliance checks on it. Real cool products. Yeah, I'm not gonna say it. Anyway, you can reach out to me directly, and I'll tell you who the company was. And found a conflicting IP address. They had two devices, two network devices. This wasn't even a firewall. This was the security guy. That was the other thing, is that he was able to see things about what was in the network silo that took him. I have to go to this person, who then has to ask this person, who then might go back to this person, and it maybe eventually get to me in a timely manner the information I need about the network. And what it was, he passed that on to the networking guy, say, hey, look, this might have been that reason, because what was happening is you had an ARP conflict. And so one would be up, the other would be up, one would be up, whoever won, right? And so once I got rid of that conflicting IP address, hey, there you go, you're networking, you have your availability. And that's, sometime I want to talk to you about, like, touching in on the basics, because your security guys are going to know about CIA. Sometimes they need to be reminded, hey, availability is the most important. Confidentiality in this case is the most important thing. And just touching on those concepts, and it's not as to be pedantic or whatnot, but it's just like, if you get into a new swimming pool. So I live in Florida, and if I see a new swimming pool, I want to know how deep it is in case I end up in that deep end. And I expect, if I go underwater and I expect the bottom to be closer than it is, I don't want to be in a position where I'm like, all of a sudden, panicking or whatever. And it's not that big of a deal. It's just a convenience thing. And it's just what to expect. And so I like to touch bottom. I like to go make sure that I know how deep it is. And also because I have two kids, and if I want to know where the deep end, when they get cool as well. And so
Yeah.
it's a matter of, and I look at the water level as the knowledge level that you need to come up to get what we're talking about here. And so if you can touch bottom, they'll know where to connect, and as far as making a relationship to what they already know, and it brings them up to the water level, to the knowledge level line. And
Love that example. Absolutely love the example. And it brings me to another question is, like, how do you, as somebody who's dabbles in that all the time, because from your perspective of that product and that particular problem, you're becoming so engrossed in it, like it's almost things that seems like obvious to you because you're like all the time
mhm,
doing it and seeing it and customers and so on. It's sometimes you risk the not leading the person through that journey to discover what they're supposed to discover. And you can't, sometimes telling them does not necessarily mean that they're going to get it. You
yeah,
have to kind of have them walk there. And it's an art form. Somebody who does
yeah,
it really well,
yeah,
it's a real art form.
yeah. The many, telling stories really helps with that. Um, Telling real world stories of what the product can do will build confidence in the end results of the product, but it won't necessarily mean that they understand what the product does. And the technical resources need to understand what the product does if they don't already know. And so I've done a lot of channel work where I have to onboard partners to something that may or may not be a checkbox for them. Like, firewalls are a checkbox. You have to have firewalls. They're going to be up to speed on firewalls. SIM is practically a checkbox for most organizations. So in EDR, some kind of endpoint security is going to be a checkbox. And it just, it goes up the line, and the number of checkboxes gets thinner and thinner, depending on the organization and whatnot. But so you got to make it interesting for these partners, resources, to want to even think about your product. And so you got to make it meaningful. You got to be able to bring it down. You got to touch bottom. You got to touch that pool bottom and find out where their knowledge starts, and hopefully you can engage their interest as well. And if you can get their interest in there as well, like, hey, this does some neat stuff. Once you understand, once you get it, once you get over that little hump of understanding and why this is different and why this is cool, uh, then you at least have mind share, and then hopefully they see, if they're not proactively pushing you to clients, they at least recognize when that problem or that pain or that late pain even exists, and they can then bring you in.
And what about what you describe when you're selling a technical solution and then the technical folks, they love it.
Mhm.
It can really decrease the time to resolution, whatever the case may be. But then the management, they don't really care. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
they bring this solution. It's like this, and then you might spend the wheels trying to convince it from a technical perspective. It's something that they should look at. But then from the business driver, they really don't care. So yeah, you're gonna spend as an admin 5 more hours a week. You're already there. You might as well.
Yeah.
Why should we spend the money to become more effective?
Well, that's relationships start coming in, and that's where your sales guy has got to have that good relationship with management. And you know, um, if that relationship isn't there, then it's got to be a technical win. This flying flag. Hey, you need this, and hey, you can't ignore this anymore. Kind of situation. But if there's not active pain going on, management might spin their wheels. Um, and there's such analyzing networks. Networking guys don't want to hear. Well, no one wants to hear their baby's ugly. No matter what it is, whatever product you're presenting, outside of this is a necessary evil where I set up this stuff and like, oh, this set it up wrong. No one necessarily wants to hear that. There's a discomfort with that, and particularly with networking guys, because they have to have availability, and because TCP/IP is so flexible, you can do it in so many different ways, and that doesn't mean you should do it certain ways. And they get it going, it's working. They're dealing with the challenge now. They got someone screaming about this, or there's something on fire over here. And you come in here and say, hey, look, here's these 50 problems you have with your network. That's not going to fly. So you got to spoon feed it with them. Um, so going back to management, there's got to be something that convinces management that says, hey, this is going to keep you off the front page of the net or of a newspaper, right? Above the fold, as they used to say, or I say now, above the scroll, right? So if you're, if you're going to be on Yahoo News that, you're compromised, you don't want to hear that. There's some compromises, it's like, oh, look, I had a compromise. But they have to disclose, right? Because of whatever reasons. But if you can minimize and convince them, hey, you don't have to deal with this incident to where it's embarrassing. Your company's embarrassed, your reputation is not ruined, but tattered. Then, hey, this is our solutions for you. So you gotta tie it into them somehow where it's of value to them. They're gonna look like the hero, or and of course, I think a lot of that has to do with the sales guy. But if you could mention it too, or reinforce, strategize with the sales guy, like, hey, this is gonna make you look like a hero. You're gonna say this, and you can communicate this to the board like this. And because now C-level execs, or particularly CEOs, are vulnerable to significant incidents or breaches. If they don't have
So
agents in place,
you worked through the years with a lot of salespeople.
Mhm.
What makes that magic happens between when you have like an A team
Oh,
where you guys are cohesive and you have that
yeah.
rhythm and you're successful, you're pursuing these sales, and what makes it successful, that relationship, and then maybe the attributes of both.
So a lot of communication. Um, as much as you can find out about the client from each other, what's working, what their problem, what the prospects' pain points are. Let's focus on this. Let's do this outside of the boardroom or the conference room. Let's you know let's make sure we follow up in this way. What do you think about this? You know,
But isn't it also personal,
yeah, oh
a
yeah, yep.
personal relationship? I mean, you're kind of almost dating that person for a little while.
Hey, you're revealing too much. I don't kiss and tell. Um, no, yeah, you're absolutely right. There's got to be a chemistry. You have to have the same mindset. You have to be on, gotta have the same goals. And if one is just going, show up and throw up, and the other one wants to provide a solution, then there's going to be a problem, and it's not going to work out.
How do you make those hard conversations? How do you deliver some of that to maybe some feedback or things that you trying to make the team better? Because again, it's a fine line, and some
Yeah.
salespeople are not notoriously, they don't like to be criticized.
Well, yeah, so that's where you got to be a friend, right? And if you're not willing to take it, if you're going to dish it out and you're not willing to take it, no matter how you dish it out, um, then yeah, it's not going to work. You need to be able to, receive as much, and if you do have a piece of advice, you got to start with the positive, like, hey, I really like the way you did this. I don't understand why you did this though, and how it, help me understand why you did it, and maybe they didn't know they did it. Maybe just something you picked up on. As a technical individual, you tend to pick up uh, on smaller things sometimes, and yeah, and so the individual may not even know that they did a certain thing, and you do. We're all the same, and I really want you to let me know what could I have done better. What would you have preferred I said, or how I say it? So the coaching, and even looking to them as a mentor, and putting yourself in their shoes, like, hey, what are you know what do you got to do with this guy? What do you got to do to get this over the hump? How can I help you get there? So if you
Right.
do that and establish that with them, then you're gonna have good success.
We've kind of running out of time here, but I wanted to just ask a couple of just last questions. It's been great. Just, are there any particular technologies that you come across from a cybersecurity networking perspective? Let's sprinkle some AI innovation in there that really like you pay attention to, it excites you.
Yeah. So technology behind the cybersecurity is what I'm seeing lately. I've been able to see behind the curtain a bit, and it's been going on for a while, really. OSPF uses graph theory to build out a map of the routing that it's in it, whatever its domain that it's responsible for. So graph theory is used heavily by cybersecurity. It's used by Google, and its searches and shown related searches that I really don't care about. So much fluff, and it's always going to the verbatim for Google. And that that use of graph theory I heard recently used as basically a map of a pattern for an attack. But graph theory isn't the only way you can do that. And I happened to come across last year while preparing a curriculum, for cybersecurity for new hires, just an introduction, and where I was going to touch bottom, and this this was so compelling to me, and it's using Fourier series and Fourier transform. And 200 some odd year old formulas. And in short, this guy Fourier in France showed how any wave could be shown to be a sum of sine and cosine waves individually. And it's an amazing thing. And we use it in audio compression and video compression and all kinds of other things. And it too can be a way to show an image, and particularly as a series. And if you look at One Brown, Three Blue, he really covers it in an amazing way. He wrote a Python script that you can download, and if you have a vector image, a line image, then you can rather have for your series created that then draws out this image. And then all it is individual arrows around an axis, except that each one is at the end of another arrow. And so you have these things that are spinning around at a regular rate. None of them vary in their their frequency, which is their base sine wave. That's all a sine wave is, a representation of something going in a circle. And you put all those together and you end up with a unique image. And once you get that unique image, then bam, you can match it to other patterns, whether or not a pattern, say an attack pattern, say logs, specifically the way Log4j does it, as you guys, you and Geo were showing me, it's amazing. You can take this information and then create this image that's easily matched against. And then, like you guys were saying, you can edit it, you can then turn around and publish it, and it will have an immutable token associated with it, and you can make money off of it.
Yep.
Destroy
And
it.
pattern recognition is a problem that's been around for a long time.
Yeah.
And matching of patterns with the large data sets or streaming information in logs or telemetry is a real issue. We're generating massive amount of information everywhere, and we having issues to digest it and extract the knowledge out of it.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of in as much computing power as we throw at it, is still there's some issues associated if you're doing matching like many to many match. It's almost impossible to do.
Yeah, and something I should clarify with once you have this pattern matching, it's generalized in such a way that it doesn't matter what the source is necessarily. You can make it about the source, say the IP address, and again about the destination, but it's generalized in such a way that it becomes this abstraction of an attack, and or maybe it's just a tactic or procedure within a tactic, and you can keep track of it, and you can watch an attack chain unfold in your network, and yeah, you can do all kinds of things. And if you can keep this monitoring, as it will, going on in your network, you can more easily see what's going on, stay on top, and hopefully make it age more like wine than cheese.
So do you think that there's going to be a time where LLMs are going to be created specifically, large language models to displace sales engineers, basically, just to allow people to take all your tacit information, knowledge, procedures, actions. LinkedIn just had us opt into, actually have to opt out of it because they opt us in on the AI learning.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting because I saw somebody make a comment that we're not being displaced by AI, we're being displaced by enterprise using AI to displace us.
Yeah, there's always, so that's one of the things I touched on in that introduction to cybersecurity, is that there's always a subject and there's always an object. Don't ever lose sight of that. there's always an actor and there's always something that the actor acts upon. Even if that actor created the program 10,000 miles away and sent it over the internet and it's been hanging out on your network for 6 months and now it's reactivated itself and it seems autonomous, but no, there's a principal mover and he or she moved it. Now it's in your network, so get rid of it. Anyway, there's always an actor, and so that's exactly the same thing. It's AI is not doing anything itself. We can anthropomorphize it as much as we want, but it's not. It'll never be human. It may act like human, and I think that as far as like a sales engineer goes, an LLM might replace us if the querying party is also an LLM. Like, hey, go research this, go find out, and this, because how much can you type in what your pain and your frustration is? How intensely can you communicate what something's doing to you or whatnot? I'll give you an example, a real world example. It has nothing to do with cybersecurity. I grew up in New Orleans, sixth grade of high school. I had a friend from New Orleans. She moved to Dallas, Texas, and went through middle school there or high school, really. Went through high school there and caught up with her later while she was at college. And she out of nowhere just goes, "This is so..." That makes no sense to me. Well, it didn't make any sense to me at the time because I lived further south and New Orleans, I knew what New Orleans was like. No, humid, hot, and no wind. Here in Florida, there's a sea breeze in most of Florida, and it really helps to mitigate the temperature and the humidity. And so I didn't get it until I moved to Dallas Fort Worth. And she's right. It is so hot there. And even though I didn't understand it, I knew what her pain was because of how emphatic she was. And LLMs, they're not gonna pick that up, not today so much. And even if somebody says something off the cuff in such a way that is clearly sarcastic, they're not gonna, or even metaphorically, they're not gonna.
The day that they program sarcasm into these language models, I mean it's amazing that sarcasm is the final frontier, almost.
Yeah, because it's an insincere statement of fact, right?
And it's just to be able to recognize it requires some sort of intelligence.
Yeah, it really does.
Because if you take it on the face, and sometimes you have to ask, are you being sarcastic?
Yeah.
If you're unsure. Bill Totman, what's the easiest way to get hold of you, to know more, just any connection request? What's the easiest way?
LinkedIn's the best way, particularly for professionally. LinkedIn's definitely the best way. I give you my email address, but I have 6 friends.
Good stuff. It's been a real pleasure, and looking forward to knowing more and maybe doing something again once you change your banner.
Yeah.
On your thing, looking forward to track you on your journey to get a new role.
Yeah.
And
find out why my cat Kirby has the title TS.
Well, we forgot. Yeah, they adopted, right? Like a Kirby cat.
Yeah. He was a stray, and we rescued him, and through an agency, of course. And he snuck out before Tropical Storm Debbie passed by over the Gulf to the west of us. But we had heavy winds and rain, and he snuck out, thankfully, just onto the porch and spent all night out in the tropical storm. So now he's he came in with barely, a little bit, a little wet spot on his back, but he was unfazed, and he's a red tabby, and I call him TS Kirby every now and then. So.
They're like hardy little guys.
Oh yeah.
There's something to be said about what's 9 lives.
Well, that
you probably have 11.
There's something about those red tabbies. We have a tuxedo, and my wife likes to describe Mookie as having cat-like reflexes, and Kirby has cat reflexes. He- He's a very cat. That's the best way to describe him. I mean, he's a fantastic cat though, and he's just a little bit destructive. Like I had to just finish sanding and repainting the banister for our stairs because he was using them as a
You know, Florida has a lot of people with some very exotic animals, including some panthers. So I think once you graduate from TS, you can get maybe like a panther or something like
serval.
that. Like something a little more, with a
Yeah, a
So
little more exotic. So I know not to do servals because when we did live in Dallas Fort Worth, there was some lady with a serval up in Grapevine, and
are those wildcats?
yeah,
Is
so,
that what it?
yes, yeah, and it got loose, and she saw it one more time, and she called its name, it looked at her, and walked into the woods.
I had a calling, and then the problem is it's not just about you. If you have one of these, what
Mhm.
happened to your neighbors with
Yeah,
other types of smaller animals that
yeah,
may magically disappear?
yeah. Well, there's a lot of birds of prey around, so they have lots of lizards and to eat on, and I've seen what was it? Oh yeah, panthers versus alligators. So yeah, they'll go at it. So it's interesting.
Well, the Jurassic Park of Florida in the modern era. But thank you very much for joining me today. It's been a real pleasure. We went over time, but it was well worth it.
Absolutely.
Looking forward to track you on your journey and keeping in touch. And then until then, for all those who joined, highly recommend reaching out to Bill. Say hi, ask him about the adventure with the tubby cat, and then until then, stay safe online as well as offline. I'll see you in the next episode.
Thanks, guys. Bye now.
Thank you.